Welcome to HR Voices, a podcast where people leaders share their side of the story. We talk about the challenges they're facing, how they're addressing them, and what changes they hope to see as the workplace evolves. This podcast is sponsored by All Voices, the all-in-one employee relations platform. Hello, welcome to HR Voices. I'm your host, Rebecca Taylor, and I'm here with Jeff Weber, Chief People Officer at Breeze Airways. Jeff, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Great to be here. Thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah. So I always like to start these with sort of some context on who you are and what do you do. So can you tell us about your role as Chief People Officer and what it's like working at Breeze Airways?
Yeah, I can. So Chief People Officer, probably pretty clear on what that role is and what I do here. Maybe it's helpful to give you some context about Breeze Airways because I think it's relevant as we talk about the role of people and what we focus on in the business. Breeze, as you may be aware, is a fast-growing airline founded just 4 or 5 years ago by David Neumann. This is his 5th airline he's founded, so he has a lot of experience in this area. And as you can imagine, founding an airline during COVID was a little crazy. So that's part of the past and part of our culture and what we talk about is surviving during difficult times and carrying that forward. And then as far as the focus of Breeze, which I think is also relevant as we talk about our team member experience, is providing a really seriously nice guest experience in underserved airports, all for a fair price. And so that's really kind of what Breeze is focused on, what sets us apart from the industry. As you can imagine, Rebecca, the industry is really difficult. There's a lot of operational complexity, tight margins, a lot of change consistently. Several low-cost carriers right now are struggling. Despite that and what's happening in the industry around us, Breeze continues to grow very quickly because of our unique approach and route structure and how we use the advantage of the Airbus 220 aircraft, which are all new. A data point that may be interesting for your audience is we're adding 1 new aircraft every month. So that requires us to staff, grow, and complete crews for those aircraft, as well as open up new routes and airports on a pretty frequent basis. So I think that sets kind of some context around that. As far as the team members here at Breeze, we have roughly 2,700 team members right now, and we're growing fast. And I know we talked a little bit about what is the people role and how do we support that. So we support a combination of flight attendants, pilots, maintenance, airports and stations, a complete group of guest experience for all of our guests, not to mention our corporate support functions that are helping us build and grow this airline, including technology. We rely on a lot on technology and building out data-driven business decisions, which I think are super important for us. So that's a little bit of context about that. I hope that was helpful, Rebecca, but happy to go into more details about what we focus on at Breeze, why I came to Breeze, or anything else that would be useful as far as context before we dive into specific people-related things.
Yeah, that is really helpful context, especially when you talk about not just the type of growth, but also how it relates to how you started. You're kind of like, it's like Bane from Batman. Like I was born in the darkness. So,
Yeah, exactly.
so this is like, even as hectic as the industry might be right now, it's almost easy for you to compare to, would you say it's a breeze? Is life a breeze?
It's a breeze. We call it as the breeze blows some days, for sure.
I like that. I like that. And I'm curious, you've been there for just about a year, right? So what did bring you to Breeze?
So just about a year. And what was interesting, I've historically been in software and technology businesses and helping grow and scale businesses from that context and background, which is a lot different from this.
Yeah.
So when David first started talking with me about coming to Breeze, I'm like, great. It sounds like a real interesting opportunity, but I don't know anything about running an airline. You may want to talk to someone else. And he actually said, no, that's what I'm looking for. I want to build a culture that's more like a software company and that actually focuses on why we're different, why we treat people differently, because his view, and I've now gained an appreciation for this, is if we create a really amazing team member experience at Breeze, that carries over to our guest experience. And that really helps us set ourselves apart from other airlines. And so we focus a lot on that. And that's one of the big challenges. How do we build that culture into an airline that's different than other places that really sets us apart? And, one of the examples of that as far as the impact on our guest experience, our guest NPS score as an airline is in the 70s, which is incredible. That's one of the top-notch scores. And it really says we're trying to do something different and provide that different experience at really a reasonable price for people.
Yeah, that's incredible, especially when you consider a lot of times when I fly, I'm like, I got there. That's as
Right.
much as I could say of the experience. Like I got there, I was alive. It is what it is. So focusing on the guest experience, I think, is a good way to also differentiate, in, a place where usually you're kind of just lucky to be there, I guess. So, I'm curious about, you talk about hypergrowth like that. You've transitioned from working in a different industry to now being in the aerospace, right, in the airline industry. So what are some of the challenges that come along with that? If you can even narrow it down to three, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for me, I always try to focus on what is our talent strategy and how does that deliver to the needs of the business. And the needs of the business are growing very quickly in multiple locations around right now, the US primarily, with some international. And how do we staff and grow the talent with the skills, capabilities, and experiences we need to provide that really amazing guest experience? While, by the way, operating safely, on time, and paying extra attention to our guests while we do all of that. So it's a lot, right? And a
Yeah.
lot of complexity because most airlines use a hub and spoke model where they hire a lot of staff in a couple locations. We hire staff at all of our locations because it's more route point to point instead of hub and spoke. And so it creates a little bit more of a challenge from both hiring and building and growing our team. And then, of course, with any fast growing organization, we're probably going to grow by 1,000 new team members this year. How do you build that experience? So how do you onboard them in a way, get them excited about Breeze and what we're doing, how we're different, give them all the information they need to be successful in their roles very quickly, and continue to make sure that we have training that helps people as they grow into the business or grow into new leadership roles, have the capabilities and information they need to be successful in the roles. And not only that, how do we build a platform that's scalable across the board for all those people who happen to be on their way to an airport or working different shifts and all across the country at different time zones? And how do we provide that in a way where everyone can be connected in a scalable way? So those are the big challenges we're focusing on right now. I know that's a lot, but we're just trying to build this so it can scale for the future and make it so much easier to get the information everyone needs to do their job, understand what's going on in the business, and stay connected with everyone else.
Yeah. It's funny because there are so many different nuances in airlines, even just from like thinking about obviously experience flying, but even just in what you're saying that you don't really think about in other businesses. Cause, you're talking about having folks that are working in airports, right? Which are not buildings that you control, right? They're sort of just in a spot. This is the gate, this is the terminal, this is whatever it is. And, so then it doesn't mean that every single employee is going to have the same experience in all these different locations. I'd love to kind of talk a little bit more about what you're doing to kind of form that connection point from everybody who's working in all these different spots. Do you have any tips and tricks?
Well, I have what we're doing. I don't know if those are tips or tricks, but there's two things I could probably highlight around that. One is we have weekly team member calls with the different groups. So David, our CEO, we have a weekly pilot call with our pilots, with our flight attendants, with our technicians, and with all of our other team members. And really, it's just an update. Here's what's going on in the business. Here's some recent new routes we've announced or new processes or some other announcements, and then an opportunity for Q&A. We do that every week, and that's a lot. But we find that that really helps people stay connected when they're logged into that call and they can hear what's going on in the business and know what's going on across the business in different airports and different locations. And that, I think, helps keep people connected, helps reinforce our culture, talk about what's really important for us. We talked about safety. We talked about our values, what it means to be a safe, well-run operation. We use guest experience stories, all those kinds of things to help build that camaraderie around that. And then a second thing we've done, which may be interesting to HR practitioners, is we decided that what we have to do is provide an experience for our team members that's more like they get as consumers. Right now, we're all in the age of you log on to ChatGPT or whatever AI tool you want every day, and you get information at your fingertips when you want it, where you need it. Yet in most companies, they don't get the data or information they need as accessibly. And so we've rolled out a new AI-enabled tool called Harper, and it's provided by WISC, and it's like having an HR business partner. So someone can just type in Teams or an email a question to Harper of whatever it is they're wondering about, and it will not only summarize all of our policies, practices, procedures, training guides, everything else, and give them a quick summary. It will link them to that training or that content so they know where to go if they want more detail or who to talk to if they don't know who in the organization manages that particular question.
That's
So we're
cool.
finding that's really helping us scale and grow the business, especially for people who are running, like I said, back and forth from airports or on the road or in hotels or wherever they may be. They have a quick, immediate answer. So they don't have to wait for someone to respond the next day in an urgent question. And it's just helping people do their jobs faster and more quickly. We talk a lot as we onboard all the new hires about path to productivity. How can we help people start and get productive as quickly as possible and give them all the information they need to do their jobs. And we're finding this tool is really helping us do that and really adding a lot of value quickly and giving them answers to questions when they need it rather than waiting for someone to respond to them. And so that's handling all of our tier one, tier two level questions and even helping pre populate forms or requests or other things. So that's one way we're trying to utilize AI to help us scale and grow in the business and giving that real personalized, customized experience quickly for people who need information.
Yeah, I think that's so cool because it's almost like there's a lot of talk in the HR space about what you can automate and, how you can sort of take some of the frontline work away from HR. Especially, I mean, my first HR job, I was working in retail in a store and I was sort of at the front desk, like listening to, like taking calls, dealing with people as they were coming in. Plus, you had a queue of questions. And the biggest complaint was always just how long it took to get back to someone when someone only has so much time on their break to ask a question, right? So something like Harper, what you're talking about is sort of a dream because it's easier for the employees. They can get those answers, like you said, to an extent really quickly, but then it also has to be a huge relief on HR. Now, did you find that when you were introducing this tool to your team, what was the reaction? Because sometimes it's like, is this going to take my job? What does this mean for me? Like, how did your team react?
Absolutely. We talked about how as we scale as a business, there's plenty of work to go around. And the way I presented it to the team is, hey, this will take care of a lot of that administrative first level tier one, two tier or tier two kind of work. And that's going to free you up to help focus on being a true business partner to the company groups that we support and actually helping them solve bigger problems instead of just spending all of our time responding to emails and answering questions. So it's really taking up a level the kind of support we provide to the business. And yes, we may need to hire fewer HR business partners in the future, but all the people we have here now are going to be utilized at a much higher level than they were before, and making sure the content is updated, people get answers to their questions, and then they know what to do next. So I look at our role as more of an internal consultant. How do we help our business leaders become successful in delivering to the business what they need to? And that's more of our focus now instead of just answering basic tier one questions.
I think that's so smart because it also kind of, the other narrative that you hear in HR all the time is how do I go from being reactive to proactive?
Yeah.
So you can't do that if your job is basically just react to questions and emails all the time, especially when you're at 2,700 employees, you're hiring another 1,000. Like that workforce is going to grow, which means you're going to get more and more questions all the time. So this is sort of a way to kind of start down that path because you don't have to sit there reacting to you're not a human inbox anymore. You're
Yeah.
actually able to think and not just do.
Exactly. That can be very overwhelming and very time consuming and not adding really high value to the organization, especially when it's repeating the same answers over and over again. The one other use case I'll mention, which I briefly talked about, is when we do training in the organization, and you've probably seen this more and more organizations you work with, no one wants to sit through a day of training anymore, right? You get a couple
No.
hours maybe. Our attention spans are terrible nowadays. And so
Give me a
how do we
TikTok video if I need to know
exactly.
everything I
Just
need to
give me a
know.
video on YouTube. I'm good. And so that's what people want. And so we've started moving more of our training to short form content that's available in the flow of work. And so as you think about it, when I'm at an airport, I need to remember something I learned or heard about in training a while ago. I can type that question into Harper and it pulls from all of our training content and summarizes very quickly what you might call a job aid or immediate information. Oh, here's the 4 steps you usually follow when you do this with a guest or when you follow this process with an aircraft arrival. Whatever it is, they can look it up very quickly and get a quick job aid right there on their phone or their iPad. And then if they want more information or want to go refresh that night and look at the course again, they can do that as well. So it's really summarizing that information, making it accessible in real time and usable when they need it. And so that's going to help us, I think, leverage the training content we've already created and make it more available to people and putting it in front of them.
Yeah. I think that's really, really smart because that's half the battle is like it's not even just about sitting there and taking the time to watch a video. Sometimes it's just like information overload where I need to know the information in the moment that I need to apply it, not, hear a whole lot of about something and then 3 months later try to figure out what it is that I heard. Um,
Exactly.
Yeah, there was some study that I'm not going to cite properly because I know I don't remember where I read it, but it was something about how that's sort of a pivot into adult learning too, that adults tend to learn more within context and tying a theory to an action pretty quickly because it's just how we're wired once we're in the workforce. So that's a smart way to kind of bring it to reality too.
Yeah, absolutely. As consumers, we live in an environment where we get what we need just when we need it. We'll type a question in some form of AI, we'll get an answer. And that's what we're looking for. We want that short video or short information clip And that's what we need when we need it. So we just haven't done a very good job of bringing that into companies we work with and giving that same experience. And so that's what we're trying to focus on.
Yeah, I think it's cool. It's a good project to take on. I mean, in my humble opinion, for whatever 2 cents that's worth.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun for our team. And then it does a great job of summarizing stats. How many people are utilizing this? What are they searching for? What
Hmm.
questions do they have that don't get answered so we can enhance those resources? So it's
Yeah.
really given us a lot of good data throughout the organization on what's being utilized and how we can do better.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so when you're thinking about, folks that are so distributed and moving so fast and doing all these things, we talked a little bit about sort of driving that connection through, through weekly calls so people know what's going on. How do you take that a little bit further and really kind of build those feedback loops and those listening cycles for people who, you don't get to see every day, who might not be able to bring up a question in an all hands because they're listening in as they're going somewhere else, right? Like, how do you have sort of a scalable listening strategy the way you work?
Yeah, absolutely. So we supplement that with a few different things. One is the chat during the calls, and both the recordings afterwards are very active. And people don't seem to be afraid to ask any question. I'll say that up front.
I love
And
that.
we get
Yeah,
a
that's
lot of
great.
great questions. Some of them are, why'd we choose this route, or why'd we do this? And then we have a way to answer, which I think is great because it's number one, making us aware of what the questions are, and two, giving us a chance to give context. Hey, we made this decision for the following reasons. Not sure it was the best decision, but here's why we did it. And by the way, if that's not working, please tell us and we can enhance it. And then we follow it up with regular, obviously, we do engagement surveys and pulse surveys and other things, but we also have focus group meetings with different groups where we find there's maybe some things that aren't working well as far as our scalability. When you grow as fast as we are, we're growing 30% plus a year right now. And that's fast on top of a pretty big base already. And we've only been around 4 years. So it's really fast, kind of paced, and everyone's just running all the time. And so, how do we make sure people get that information? They have a chance to give feedback. And yes, there are going to be things that we did a year ago that aren't working this year that we need to enhance or improve. And so, we have to find ways to build kind of this culture where it's a learning environment. And we say, hey, that may have worked then, it's not working now. What should we change? How do we make it better? And so we need to build a culture where it's okay to say, this isn't working, and here's what I would hope we do differently or better. And so it's creating that feedback loop and making it feel safe. And I think as part of what those calls do is people feel safe asking questions and hopefully getting a dialogue started. Then we'll sometimes take it offline with other groups where it's a specific department that would like to dig into an issue or make an enhancement or improvement.
Yeah. I think it's really smart. I read something where something else because I spend my whole day just reading documents and just sort of learning, right? Um, they say that one of the earliest signs of disengagement on a team is when there's no friction. So it's not so much that, it's when employees stop asking questions, or it's when they stop, saying things even just as bluntly as like, why'd you pick that route? I hate that route, or, whatever. Like, that shows, like, that type of friction and engagement. It shows that they care. It's when it starts to go quiet, or when you're not getting real, questions, that's when you're kind of losing people. So to hear that the chat's really active, that, it's sort of a group that is engaged, like, that's who you want when you're growing that quickly too. Cause I imagine, there's, if you're growing the way that you are and you're hiring people the way that you are, I imagine there's growth opportunities in the company that, it's like, it kind of, you're building your future leaders as you're also building your current team.
Absolutely. And so that is one of the challenges as we continue to add, another 30% growth this year to our team member base. We're going to have a lot of opportunities for growth, but that's also going to put people in new roles they may have never been in before. So how do we help them succeed in those new roles and prep them for that when it's happening so quickly? And goes back to the utilization of that technology.
Yeah, that's great. So I know one of the common statements in startups is, when you're kind of trying to do a lot of things all at once, it's we're building the plane while we're flying it. Does that work at Breeze, or is that kind of like a touchy metaphor?
It's probably a difficult metaphor to say it here, but the same thing applies. We are building some things as we grow and replacing outdated technology with new technology and doing that while we're using the technology we're using, whatever it is. And that really starts with David at the top saying we want to build the best technologically enabled business that we can, both for our guest experience and our team member experience, and make sure those gel together. And yeah, we have some systems we've probably outgrown that need to be replaced. And we're always looking for the future. How do we make this much more scalable? It worked before when we were smaller. It's not working now. And
Yeah.
so it's outdated. We need to replace it or build it. And yes, we have to do it while we're still flying and
Yeah.
everything on in the middle of it. So
Yeah.
it creates a lot of interesting dynamics to build and grow this fast in this kind of environment.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a really cool place to be, and it's a really cool time to be there too. It's like, the people who are there now are going to look back in 5 years and they're going to say, I was there when this was happening and I was part of this, this thing. There's a lot of sort of, I've always worked in startups, for at least for a while. I founded a company. So it's like, I know that sort of when you look back and you feel that pride of, we did this, we built this, and I can hear, your attachment to the culture, the values is really coming out in what you're saying. So I appreciate you sharing what you're working on with us.
Yeah, I think that's going to be one of our biggest challenges. Growing is great and growing fast is great with its own set of challenges, but keeping what you have, honoring the past, carrying it forward, building what's better in the future. How do you keep all that together and share that story as people come through the process, both through the interview stage and then the onboarding stage, and carry that with them to continue providing that experience? Because our guest experience is one of our core differentiators, and that comes from our team members. And so, how do we make sure we carry that forward so we don't have those bad experiences for our guests, at least beyond our control? And so that's really what we focus on, is kind of building that environment culture. And one more thing I'll add, and I know a lot of companies do this, we've had to distribute that team member experience through our ambassador committee and distribute it to different locations. So members of our team that may be a flight attendant or maybe a pilot or an airport staff, they run that location's ambassador committee where they plan events. We're involved in our communities a lot because we serve these mid-sized airports. And so we do service events or things where that crew or that base gets together and works on a project. We do things like sponsor Make-A-Wish Foundation. As you can imagine, that's kind of fun to offer those opportunities for people to fly on our flights to go to different locations. Funny enough, Orlando is a popular location for those flights for Disney World and others, or Santa Ana for Disneyland. And so it's kind of fun for our team members to help support that. And so we have to distribute that. We can't keep tight control at the top. We have to help set the tone of what that looks like and then have people self-manage. And so that's another thing. If you're into controlling everything, it doesn't really happen all the time the way you want it to. It's just give people and empower them an opportunity to do those things at a base location.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that there's that connection to the community and just sort of that heart too, because that's hard to fake, right? That's true values coming in. That's true sort of that's real culture. It's like, they say, culture isn't spoken, it's felt. That's
Yeah.
that's an exact example of how that shows up. So thank you for sharing that. And I know, believe it or not, we're actually at the end of time, the end of times. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to share with anybody listening?
I thank you for letting me be on here. It's great to be able to talk about these things. I think stepping back and looking at it from how do we as a people function, add strategic value to an organization? What does that look like? What are the key strategies of the business and how do we help deliver on those in the most efficient, best way possible to deliver on those key metrics the business is focused on? I think as people function, we need to get better at that business partnering role, understanding what those needs are, and really diving in and helping support our leaders as they try to deliver on those objectives. And that may look a little different than the traditional people or HR function in the past. And so I think it's really important to understand the needs of the business, help deliver on those, and show that we're truly adding value and not just telling people what they can and can't do. Our role is to
Yes.
help support as an internal consultant. So I think that's the biggest takeaway I would suggest people think about.
Yeah, that's such a good one. And thank you for sharing that. And thank you for being here. This is really fun. I loved hearing, I love learning more about, about Breeze and sort of the early stages of an airline. I've never really thought about sort of the craziness that kind of goes into that, but it sounds like it's a really cool, time to be there too. So thank you for taking time with us. And thank you everybody for listening. I hope you have a good day.